Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you lost, but you couldn't explain why? Like you agreed to something that didn't sit right with you, but it felt easier to say yes than to argue? Or maybe you stayed quiet, kept the peace, let it go, again, and told yourself that was maturity, that was kindness? Let me ask you something more uncomfortable. What if that wasn't your choice? What if you were played without anyone raising their voice? What if your silence was the product of invisible strings and someone else's design? You see, the most dangerous people in your life aren't the loud ones, not the screamers or the tyrants. The most dangerous ones are the nice ones, the soft ones, the ones who smile when they lie and thank you while they trap you. And here's the worst part, they don't need to force you. They make you do it to yourself. And you'll call it love. You'll call it friendship. You'll call it being a good person. But in truth, you're being trained, gently, consistently, quietly. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this long before psychology gave it a name. He wrote in The Prince that it's not power that manipulates, it's perception. Men judge more by their eyes than their hands, he said. Meaning, it doesn't matter what's true, it matters what seems true. If someone seems kind, we trust them. If someone appears hurt, we help them. If someone praises us, we lower our guard. That's not goodness. That's programming. And it's everywhere. In families, at work, in relationships, in the media. Everywhere people are afraid to seem mean. There is someone ready to use that fear as a tool. Real manipulators don't shout. They sigh. They don't argue. They imply. They don't demand. They make you offer a subtle look, a perfectly timed silence, a compliment that feels just a bit too tailored to your insecurity. They read you like a book, your body language, your tone, your hesitations, and they flip the pages until they know how the story ends. You may think, no, not me. But that's exactly what a good manipulator wants you to think. That you're too smart, too aware, too strong. Machiavelli would laugh, because strength without clarity is weakness. Confidence without awareness is a liability. Here's what they won't tell you. Manipulation is most effective when it looks like compassion. That's why it works. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like trust. And that's where it begins, with your gaps, your silent needs, the things you won't admit to even yourself. The longing to be seen, the fear of being alone, the guilt of saying no. These are the cracks through which the manipulator slides in. They don't force, they fulfill. And once they give you what you crave, approval, reassurance, belonging, they wait. For the debt, for the compliance, for the silence. Let's be honest, most people are emotionally trained to be compliant, not by school, not by religion, but by something far more powerful, the desire to be loved. From childhood, we're taught, be good and you'll be loved. Please others and you'll be accepted. Disappoint someone and you're selfish. And so we grow into adults who confuse compliance with kindness. We give in, we say yes, we smile through resentment, and the manipulator, they don't need to push. They just stand there, gently holding the door open, while you walk right into your own emotional cage. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But what if we rephrased it for our topic? Until you name your emotional blind spots, they will be exploited, and you will call it love. That's the truth most people never confront. They stay in relationships where they're constantly drained. They keep peace with people who never offer them the same. They bend over backwards for validation and call it loyalty. It's not loyalty, it's emotional hostage-taking. And no, it doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. Everyone has something they're trying to fix by pleasing someone else. A wound they've never addressed, a fear they've never spoken out loud. And that's the genius of manipulation. It meets you at the exact intersection of your pain and your silence. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like comfort. Until one day you realize you haven't made a real decision in months. You haven't said no in weeks. You haven't felt like yourself in years. And you don't know when it started, but you can find where it ends. Right here, right now, by seeing what you were never meant to see. This isn't about becoming hard, cold, detached. No. This is about becoming aware. Because once you see the game, you don't play it blindly anymore. And once you name the pattern, it can't run your life in the dark. In the next part, I'm going to show you exactly how this awareness becomes power, how to build real immunity against soft manipulation, and how to think like Machiavelli without losing your soul. But first, Let this truth settle in. The kindest people in your life might also be the most dangerous. And that's not paranoia. That's clarity. If you're still watching, something in you already knows the truth. You've felt it. In that strange silence after you agree to something you didn't want to do. In the confusion after a conversation where nothing was demanded but everything was taken. In the weight of guilt that doesn't feel earned, only expected. This quiet erosion of self is not just manipulation. It's emotional design. And once you start to see how it works, you'll never unsee it. Before we go deeper, do something important for yourself. Like this video and subscribe to PsychoPulse, because this isn't entertainment, it's defense. It's protection for your most valuable asset, your mind. And the more you sharpen it, the harder you are to control. Let's continue. Machiavelli didn't write about human nature as a philosopher. He wrote about it as a realist. To him, people weren't noble or evil, they were predictable. He knew they'd chase safety, approval, power. He knew they'd follow the easiest path to emotional relief. And he knew the best way to dominate others wasn't with a sword, but with a suggestion. With a well-timed pause, with the illusion of choice. Men are driven more by what they see than by what they feel, he said. And that's the problem. You see comfort and call it love. You feel guilt and call it loyalty. You feel afraid to leave and call it staying strong. But none of that is strength. None of that is love. It's just the soft cage closing in. The manipulator doesn't need you to feel bad. They need you to feel uncertain. When you're uncertain, you hesitate. And in hesitation, there's opportunity. They can insert ideas, shift your boundaries, make you explain yourself, make you apologize for protecting your own peace. And every time you yield just a little, they move the goalposts. It never starts with control. It starts with comfort. Until comfort becomes dependency. And dependency becomes silence. Let's talk about the real battlefield. Your emotional patterns. Your default reactions are the program manipulators play like an instrument. Do you feel anxious when someone's upset? You'll give in just to make the feeling go away. Do you feel guilty saying no? Then you'll say yes even when you shouldn't. Do you fear being seen as selfish? You'll keep sacrificing your time, your energy, your values, just to avoid the label. And they know it. They see it faster than you do. That's why Machiavelli said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But let's reframe that for today's world. It is better to be respected than adored if you value your peace. Because adoration makes you malleable. Respect makes you sovereign. So how do you break free? It starts with emotional immunity. And no, that doesn't mean becoming cold or cruel. It means recognizing your emotional reflexes and breaking the ones that keep you on your knees. It means not reacting, because manipulators rely on predictability. They know that if they flatter you, you'll soften. If they act hurt, you'll apologize. If they suggest disappointment, you'll rush to fix it. So change the script. Say no when they expect a yes. Pause when they expect urgency. Remain calm when they expect guilt. In that stillness, something breaks, not in you, but in the illusion they built around you. It's in that moment they realize, you've stepped off the board. You're not a piece anymore. You're a player. This is what Machiavelli called strategic detachment. It's the ability to observe emotion without obeying it, to see manipulation as manipulation, without the need to fight, prove, or defend. It's the calm that comes from knowing your boundaries aren't negotiable. They're facts. And if someone can't respect them, that's not a relationship. It's a power play. But it's not enough to just resist. You have to become unreadable, to stop broadcasting your emotional needs to people who weaponize them. Machiavelli would say, appear open but reveal little. Share what you choose, not what you're pressured to give. Control the image and you control the influence. Because the moment people can't predict you, they can't control you. And here's a secret the manipulators hope you never learn. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they've been around. Loyalty is not slavery. Kindness is not surrender. Compassion is not compliance. You can be a good person and still say no, still walk away, still protect your peace like it's sacred. Because it is. Remember Carl Jung's warning, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But fate is just unexamined repetition. And this is your moment to stop repeating, to become conscious, to stop explaining yourself to people who never explain themselves, to stop performing niceness for those who mistake your softness for consent. In the next part, we're going even deeper. We'll explore what happens when the manipulator isn't a stranger, but someone close, someone you love, someone you live with. We'll talk about how emotional blackmail works in families, relationships, jobs, and how to untangle yourself without losing your soul. Because if you don't deal with this now, one day you'll look in the mirror and realize you've built a life for everyone but yourself. And that's the ultimate manipulation, when you become your own jailer. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The kind of discomfort you feel in your chest, not your head. The discomfort that makes you hesitate, makes you want to look away. Because what happens when the manipulator isn't someone you can easily walk away from? What happens when it's someone you love? A partner, a parent, a sibling, a boss who gave you your first break, a friend you've known since childhood. These are not villains. They don't scream or threaten. They don't corner you in obvious ways. They love you, at least that's what they say. But somehow you keep shrinking in their presence. You keep bending your will just to keep the peace. You feel responsible for their feelings, guilty for setting limits, ashamed when you try to prioritize yourself. And that's not love. That's a beautifully disguised prison. Machiavelli once wrote, "Men must either be pampered or destroyed." A brutal statement, but one that reveals an uncomfortable truth. The more someone depends on your emotional compliance, the more they will retaliate when you take it away. When the manipulator is close, they don't use force. They use closeness. They use the shared history, the trust you've built, the bond you treasure. Not to care for you, but to control you. And because you care, it works. Because you want it to be love, you stay. You stay in rooms that suffocate your voice. You stay in conversations that twist your boundaries. You stay in relationships where love is always conditional. If you obey, if you yield, if you don't make it too difficult. Let me say it clearly. Love that demands your submission is not love. It is emotional blackmail. If someone makes you feel guilty for saying no, they are not nurturing you. They are using you. If someone punishes you with silence when you assert yourself, they're not wounded, they're training you. And if someone disguises fear, guilt, or obligation as affection, they are not giving love, they are selling control. In families, this kind of manipulation wears the costume of tradition. You can't do this to your mother, you owe us for everything we've done. But respect that comes from guilt is not respect, it's coercion. In romantic relationships, it wears the costume of devotion. Without you, I'm nothing. I'm doing this because I love you. But love that makes you feel small, cornered, or indebted is not love. It's dependency masquerading as devotion. In work settings, it dresses up as opportunity. You should be grateful, we gave you a shot. But when gratitude becomes a leash, it is no longer gratitude. It is manipulation with a company logo. And here's what no one wants to admit. You let it happen. Not because you're weak, not because you're stupid, but because you're wired for connection. Because you're afraid of losing something that once felt like home, even if it's now a battlefield. Because you've been told that choosing yourself is selfish, and manipulators feed on that belief. They thrive in the emotional gray areas where you hesitate to draw a line. But here's the reality. Proximity does not excuse control. Love does not justify emotional violation, and history is not a reason to stay small. So what do? First, you set boundaries. Not harshly, not emotionally, simply and clearly. I don't do that anymore. I need time for myself. That doesn't feel right to me. A calm no is more powerful than 1,000 apologies. Second, you expose the dynamic. You don't need to yell, just state what you see. When I say no, you go quiet. When I express how I feel, you turn it into a guilt trip. This is not to start a fight. This is to validate yourself, to refuse to gaslight yourself into silence. Third, you stand firm. When the manipulator tests you, and they will, you hold the line. There will be sighs, tears, accusations, maybe silence. That's how they try to bring you back into orbit. But you don't orbit anymore. You walk your path. And if that means walking alone for a while, you walk alone. Because a life built on self-abandonment is not a life, it's a performance. Machiavelli taught that power is preserved by those who anticipate, not those who react. So anticipate the resistance, anticipate the guilt, anticipate your own doubts. But stay steady, because the moment you break this cycle, you make room for a new kind of clarity. The kind that sees through manipulation dressed as kindness. The kind that no longer confuses silence with peace. The kind that allows you to build connections not out of fear or obligation, but out of mutual respect. Carl Jung said the most terrifying thing is to accept yourself completely. But I'd add, the most liberating thing is to stop waiting for permission to do so. In the next and final part, we'll reveal what it means to truly think like Machiavelli. Not just as a defensive reaction to manipulation, but as a strategy to stay sovereign in a world built on influence. We'll explore how to protect your mind without hardening your heart, how to become unreadable without becoming cold, and how to replace emotional reflex with radical self-possession. Because you don't just deserve peace, you deserve to know why that peace was never given to you freely. This is where everything changes, not just how you deal with people, but how you walk through the world. You've seen how manipulation hides in kindness, how emotional control disguises itself as loyalty, tradition, even love. But awareness is only the first weapon. The real shift, the one that turns you from a pawn into a strategist, begins when you choose to think like Machiavelli. Not to become cold, not to become cruel, but to become sovereign, clear, unshakable. Machiavelli didn't write for people who wanted to be liked. He wrote for people who wanted to survive. He said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But fear in his eyes wasn't about threats, it was about certainty. People don't fear you when you raise your voice. They fear you when they know you won't lower your boundaries. They fear you when you're unreadable, untouchable, when their usual games don't work, when their charm falls flat, when their guilt trips don't land. That's not fear of harm, that's fear of clarity. And clarity is your new edge. So how do you build it? Step 1. Observe everything. Not just what people say, but how they say it. Not just their compliments, but the timing. Not just their stories, but the roles they assign themselves. When someone constantly paints themselves as a victim, ask, what do they gain from being powerless? When someone flatters you intensely, ask, what do they want me to give them? Machiavelli believed that men reveal more through patterns than through promises. So don't just listen, study. Step 2. Reclaim your narrative. In a world of constant influence, media, marketing, religion, relationships, there's a war being fought for your attention, your choices, your emotions. If you don't own your narrative, someone else will write it for you, and they'll write you as the obedient character, the peacemaker, the caretaker, the one who never resists, the one who bends. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And right now, you're waking up. You're seeing that emotional manipulation isn't just something others do to you, it's something you allow when your need for approval outweighs your need for peace. When your fear of disconnection overpowers your hunger for truth. Step 3. Master emotional ambiguity. Show just enough to stay human, but not enough to be disarmed. Share your truth, not your triggers. Express warmth, but don't offer your identity as currency. The more emotionally predictable you are, the easier you are to control. The more ambiguous you become, the more deliberate you turn your emotions into tools, not traps. People who manipulate rely on your emotional urgency. They need you to feel more than you think, to act on impulse, to be ruled by guilt, fear, need. So pause, observe, choose. Machiavelli knew that silence was a weapon, that the strategist wins not by force, but by being unreadable. When you don't react the way they expect, the game breaks, the script unravels, the control dissolves. But perhaps the most radical act of power? Taking full responsibility for your inner world. The manipulator thrives when you're unsure of yourself, when you need constant validation, when you treat your emotions like truth, your fears like facts. But when you regulate your mind, when you know what triggers you and why, you become untouchable. The manipulator pushes, but you don't budge. They flatter, but you don't melt. They guilt, but you don't bend. This is emotional immunity, not numbness, not walls, but a mind that cannot be seduced and a heart that cannot be owned. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. The first time you say no without defending it, the first time you don't explain your silence, the first time you choose solitude over submission, it feels lonely, it feels cold, but only at first. Then something shifts. You begin to see people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. You begin to hear the manipulation behind the compliments. You begin to feel when guilt is being used like a leash. And more importantly, you begin to choose, where before you simply reacted. Because the final truth is this: As long as you do not control your own mind, someone else will. And it won't be with chains. It'll be with a soft voice, a gentle touch, a familiar story. Sometimes it won't even be a person. It'll be an idea you were given as a child and never questioned. An image of who you're supposed to be. Kind, selfless, small, malleable. But you don't have to stay that way. You are not here to be managed. You are not here to perform loyalty to people who don't respect your autonomy. You are not here to live a life designed by guilt. You are here to build something different. A mind that sees, a heart that chooses, and a soul that walks without permission. So here's your final step. Stop performing. Start observing. Stop explaining. Start asserting. Stop reacting. Start choosing. And never forget, the most dangerous manipulator isn't the one outside of you. It's the voice inside that still believes you must be liked to be free. Silence that voice. Build your clarity. And when they come to play their quiet games again, just smile and let them realize, this time, you see. If this video broke something open inside you, don't let the insight fade. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's ready to wake up from the performance. Leave a comment below and tell me, what's one manipulation you now see for what it really is? Speak it. Name it. Because awareness is how we cut the final string. And remember this, the world doesn't need more good people who stay silent. It needs more awake ones, who refuse to play a game they didn't agree to. You're not a piece, you're the player now. Welcome to Psychopulse.